You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined this week by Oliver Camacho and Weston Williams. All right, in this episode, we go inside the huddle with countertenor Beefcake Randall Scotting to talk about Senesino, lute song, and weightlifting.
Oh.
And then the Mets 23-24 season is out. There's at least one name missing from the roster, and it rhymes with Shmildar Shmadbrazakov. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, we didn't forget Opera Philadelphia and their season announcement too. I love teasing Philly. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, click follow. Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign, send us a voice memo, email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get the OBS beard coaster. You're going to get the OBS lapel pin just for sharing your opinion. It's that easy. Oliver Camacho, great to see you.
I don't know what's happened to me. Like, you know that I'm a fan of tennis, but
Right.
I'm getting deeper and deeper into it. Like, I'm watching every tournament. Like,
Are you really?
There was a time in my life where I watched like 3 tournaments a year.
That's crazy.
And then, maybe in the third decade of my life, I started watching all 4 of the Grand Slams. And then maybe in my 4th decade, I started watching some of the Masters Series tournaments. Now I'm like watching every tournament that's on. And
take away that man's cable.
Yeah. Yesterday, we're recording on Monday as always. Carlos Alcaraz, who is destined to be the number 1 player as soon as Novak Djokovic starts to get old. He like pulled his hamstring in the middle of the final set. And like he was clearly going to win. And then like you see him pull up lame with this injury, but he finished the match. And there were moments where you're like, okay, he's just going to hit his way out of this game. He's going to he's just taking big swings, like very low percentage shots, just to like end the point quick. And sometimes he like broke his opponent Cameron Norrie, like I think 40 love or something like that, just like swinging hard at the serve. And it was shocking. It's like, oh, there's no way he's going to win. And he came close to winning, but he lost. So anyway, Carlos, I hope you recovered that hamstring of yours.
We should play tennis together one day. I would love to do that.
I'm terrible at it. I told you I was in a gay
really?
league. I was in a gay league and I was the worst player. So I always played the second to worst player. So.
Always room for improvement. Yeah. Weston Williams, how's life?
Oh, it's pretty good. I have some sports news. I attended for the first time a community dodgeball a match last week. And really? I think dodgeball might be the perfect sport, and I'm frankly shocked it is not all over ESPN, the Olympics, everywhere you look, because it's got the brutality. You have the throwing of the ball. You've got strategy. When can you block? When can you catch? How do you set people up on the board? What's the timing of things? And there's all these little intricate rules I wasn't aware of because the last time I played dodgeball was approximately middle school.
Great exercise. Fantastic. There is now a game clock in baseball. You know, there's some things you never think you're going to see in your lifetime. Now there's a game clock in baseball. Major League Baseball games are now routinely like 2.5 hours long, which is crazy. I'm not going to get to the intricacies of how it works. What I will say is that Ashley has a brilliant segment idea which ties into this, and we're going to do it next month when Major League Baseball has its opening day at the end of March. So stick around for that one. More importantly,
holding your
stick
breaths,
around
everybody.
right now for Inside the Huddle. Let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
So today's interview guest is countertenor Randall Scotting. And while you're listening to this interview, I encourage you to just stop what you're doing and go to your browser and just type in his name into your search engine and then click on that images tab. And you're like, what? He's a countertenor?
Yeah.
So you can listen to this interview and you can even watch some of his videos where he's
oh, yes,
barely dressed. But not to objectify him. Actually, I first learned about Randall when his publicist sent me his debut album and asked if I'd be interested in interviewing him. I was like, yeah, whatever. I get so many albums sent to me by so many different publicists. But like I popped it in. I was like, oh, wow. this is actually really good. And so I did end up interviewing him. So we already have established a rapport. And Randall is in Chicago right now working on the triptych premiere of Proximity, coming later on this month or in March. Yeah, you're listening March. In March at later Lyric Opera Chicago. So let's sample a little bit of Randall's debut solo album. The album is called The Crown, Arias for Senesino, and it's filled with a bunch of rarities. This is one by Giovanni Antonio Giai from the opera Eumene. Just a little sample of the singing of my guest, Randall Scotting. Welcome to OBS.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk in a minute about your new album, which comes out on the heels really of this one. Like, it feels like you came out with 2 albums in the span of a year, which is sort of a quick turnaround in the record industry. I don't know. How do you explain that?
Yeah, it's actually been within 6 months, which has been pretty intense. The reason is because the second album we recorded in the heart of the pandemic, and it's just we decided to release the OAE album first as the debut album, and then we had this other one already.
Okay.
So it just sort of was able to come out very quickly. We didn't have to go record it after.
Well, I talked to you about The Crown for my other job, and for those people who didn't hear that conversation, the summary is that you did a lot of research on music of Senesino that wasn't Handel, and you recorded. I mean, there probably a lot of world premieres on that recording, The Crown.
All except for one aria, and I thought they were all going to be world premieres, and I found out someone jumped me on one of the arias and recorded it before I could. So unfortunately, there's one that's not. But the rest, the other 13 arias on the album, are all modern premieres.
And maybe it's that your voice type, your tessitura, your range matches that of Senesino based on what we know about him.
Yeah, that was the whole idea in putting together this program. I've sung the Handel roles, quite a few of them, and I have more upcoming. So that all just fit me very well, both dramatically and vocally. And so then I wanted to look at what else was written for this singer, with the theory, the idea being that whatever else was composed for him should also fit my voice very well. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that it did. So it made for a nice experience recording that album.
Well, I got a lot of enjoyment out of listening to it, mainly because I was discovering your singing. And I said this before, but you have a very legato technique, and you always seem to sing on the breath, and your color is always warm, which is, we don't necessarily get that all the time from our countertenors, which is also something that I like. Very, what's the word? Non-bel canto technique. I think that singing non-bel canto can be very effective for certain affects. Mm-hmm. But it seems like your brand is to just approach everything from bel canto.
Well, I think that just feels right to me, to sort of have this connection to the body while I'm singing, to feel like it's really sort of not just, for lack of a better description, kind of the head up, like the throat up. I feel sometimes like the sort of choral style of countertenor singing is a little bit lacking in this full connection. And I love feeling this, like my body behind me and under me while I'm singing. So I think if that leads to, what you'd call a bel canto technique, then also it allows me to sort of embody the drama, which I think is really important to me and to the way I approach singing. So sometimes in this other way, this other technique, it's hard you have nuance and you can have ornament and style and all of that, but it's harder to have actual visceral drama in the sound, which is something that I enjoy putting in there.
Well, you're the one who keeps saying body now. So it's this perfect pivot to talking about, I don't know if you are like countertenor 2.0 or if there might be other people like David Hansen who began this new era of the countertenor, who are much more, God, this makes me sound like such a jerk, masculine men, for lack of a better word. I think that countertenors can be delicate and can be a little bit androgynous, and that's sort of the point sometimes with this music.
Yeah.
But you really embrace, your physicality. You're a weightlifter, and there's this famous production you did with West Edge Opera, and there's all these videos of you out there, basically wearing a G-string.
Yeah. I'm not shy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, I guess, can I ask you about, like, this is, you take care of yourself, that's its own thing, but do you lean into this? Is this sort of like also part of your brand?
Yeah, I think that the countertenor voice, it's this sort of juxtaposition of like male body with like this higher, more typical female range is what people would assume, just sort of being stereotypical about it. And the wonderful thing now is that we have all this fluidity, this sort of gender fluidity that can play into the voice part. And I think authenticity, which can be, people being more gender fluid and feeling comfortable as a countertenor. But for me, authenticity is being more just like the masculine guy who grew up in Colorado. That is me being my authentic self. And I just sort of bring that also to the way that I sing countertenor. And I'm very happy to put on a dress and to play gender fluid parts. There's no kind of issues or block for me.
But nobody will ever mistake you.
Yeah, right. Yes, yeah. Probably not going to be playing too many female roles, but I'm open to it. But it's just for me, this idea, I had to think about this quite a bit, because with the countertenor voice, you do, it's not like a baritone or something where you have all these sort of parts of the archetypes of the character built into the voice, and it all just sort of fits together, this sort of qualities of all of that. As a countertenor, it's a little bit more amorphous and fluid. And so I had to actually kind of consider it and think, no, this is me. This is my authentic self. I am just sort of more of I guess, a masculine guy, and that's where I'm comfortable. And so then singing things like Julius Caesar and these heroic roles are just a natural fit for me, both vocally and physically, I think, what you see on stage. So.
Yeah, you're much more believable as like the warrior hero when you're, what are you, 6'2", 6'4"?
6'3", yeah.
6'3", yeah. And what, you weigh like 225 pounds or something like that?
Or 235 when I'm really in great shape. Now I'm a little softer.
I mean, I don't want people to start Googling photos of you, but if you're interested, they're out there, everybody.
Yeah, and bodybuilding was something too that I was a little bit hesitant to delve into as a countertenor, just because I didn't know how people would receive this kind of like muscled body, and then in contrast with the higher voice, just because it's not something that has been out there. And I was also worried about ramifications vocally, like if building all this muscle is going to affect my actual singing technique. But I finally got to a point where I just decided to go for it, because I wanted to be, more fit, and pleasantly, it's all played well, and I sing better. I have a kind of stronger technique and more support, and feel more in my body as I keep saying. So yeah, it's all kind of come together in a nice way for me.
Well, coincidentally, you're one of your co-stars of the Elio Gaballo was Cavalli opera from West Edge Opera. We'll be in Chicago to sing Evangelist in St. Matthew Passion, that Derek Chester, who's another very in shape.
Yeah, that was kind of the theme of that opera specifically. Yeah, not much clothing and in shape people.
Yeah,
that's what they wanted.
So right now we're talking in Chicago. You're actually in Chicago, even though we're doing this on Zoom. You are here because you're covering in this world premiere triptych of operas at Lyric Opera Chicago. It's called Proximity. It's 3 operas in one evening and they're all world premieres. Caroline Shaw, John Luther Adams, and I forget who the third composer is.
I don't know.
Well, obviously that's not the one you're working on.
Yeah, no, that's not my piece.
But you just revealed to me that there's not a complete performing edition yet. It's still being created. Is that what's going on?
There are small changes happening in rehearsal. I mean, there is an edition, but they're basically melding all three of these operas together. So it's sort of scene by scene rather than presenting one opera, and then the next. They're all connecting, which is interesting because they're on very different themes. I mean, it is this idea of proximity and connecting with people. That is the theme that's threaded through it all. But like our opera, The Proximity, Caroline, it's called Four Portraits. This piece by Caroline Shaw, which makes up part of Proximity, is sort of about technology and how it's meant to connect us, but actually, when there are glitches in technology and things, it creates a lot of distance, and it can be very challenging to actually connect with someone authentically through all of that. And then there's another one of the other operas is about inner city gang and gun violence in Chicago. So how these things will all be blended together is still to be seen. But Yuval Sharon is directing, and he's wonderful. I've really enjoyed watching him work, and we've known each other for a little while. So I'm excited to just see what is in his mind and how this will all meld for a seamless evening.
Daniel Bernard Roumain, DBR. and that's the one that has a libretto by Anna Devere Smith, just to get that out there. So triptych of operas, Daniel Bernard Roumain, Caroline Shaw, and John Luther Adams pose. And Yuval Sharon is directing, which is very exciting. I'm so happy that, as you said, you have a relationship with him already, but I'm happy that somebody like him knows your work, because, he has his fingers in a lot of pies in the contemporary opera world. And I don't know, how do you feel about that? Like entering into this contemporary opera scene. I mean, countertenors the standard repertoire for them is going to be Handel, and anytime somebody wants to try something else, like a Vivaldi opera or a opera by one of these composers on your debut album,
it's the extremes. It's that, and then the other half or third of what I do is the really contemporary stuff, kind of Benjamin Britten and on. I made my debut at the Bayerische Staatsoper this last May, and that was in a microtonal opera by a composer named Georg Friedrich Haas. So he broke pitches down into sixth tones. So you have to sing, it was very, very complicated and interesting in theory. The idea behind it was interesting, but it's just too heady, in terms of performance. I feel like it was impossible in opera, which is this very sort of big moving art form, to think in that kind of minutia, and it just didn't. It created an atmosphere which was very interesting. It was about someone dying and about the aftermath of all of that. So in a way, then this kind of very contemporary approach, which is very dissonant, and worked for that. But it was the hardest opera I've ever learned. I spent months and months and months kind of getting the score into my mind, and I would sit and practice it for hours, and then think, okay, the next day I'll come back to it, and I'll have some of it ingrained. A little bit of it will be in my voice, and it just wasn't, because it was this entirely new system of composing, not like the Western music that we're used to, that's built on half steps and whole steps. So that kind of thing, a few of those is fine, but I don't want to build a whole career on that. But then some music like Caroline's is very, very tuneful. She's a singer herself and plays violin. And so she approaches it as if she was going to sing it. And you can tell that when you kind of get inside the music, because it's not this kind of like brutal approach. I felt that this other piece, it was like a little bit torturous. It was very challenging, and it almost had the purpose of like just seeing what you could be put through, And Caroline's music, I think, is much kinder to the singer, which is nice. And it's very lush and it's beautiful, and it still has a little bit of dissonance, but it's for the right reasons. It accentuates and heightens the point she's trying to make, rather than just being kind of a trick.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Haas piece, obviously, but I think that all composers should know how to sing, or
Yeah.
at least work with singers as they're, writing vocal lines. You can really tell, which composers do this well. And even composers like Rossini,
Yeah.
who, wrote some of the hardest music, at the core, it's middle voice. It's meant to be sung in stepwise motion. The lines are the right length for the natural breath capacity.
Yeah. You have to work hard on your agility and moving the voice and things, the sort of acrobatics of it, but it's not the same kind of harsh approach. Yeah. It's possible you get it in. And once you do, it's actually really fun to sing that music. And I feel like this other stuff just never quite gets there, and Handel's the same too. Like, I just love when you start to get it into your voice and your body, and you have a fun time singing it. Sometimes I go into the practice room and I'm in a bad mood, and it's impossible to leave in a bad mood after singing for an hour or two, because it's just such good stuff that it gets into you. And Rossini is the same way. There's kind of a joy about it. And contemporary music doesn't always have that joy. Even if it's a topic that's not a joyful topic, there still can be kind of the joy behind the composition and the music itself.
Well, we don't want this interview to get out and for people to not hire you because you don't think you're having a good time.
The truth is, I love singing contemporary music too. It's just the motivation behind it, I guess, is the important thing. Like where the music's coming from, and then how the composer shapes the way that they write the music around that is the issue.
So it sounds like you might have flirted with Rossini. Would that be correct?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, the Di Tanti Palpiti, of course. There's a couple of earlier operas that he wrote.
Yeah, Aureliano and Palmira or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes, I think has yeah.
Yeah, I would love to sing some of that on stage. No one ever hires countertenors to do that. I don't know quite why. Some of us could do it well, I think.
If you were Arsace, it would be such a believable opera.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I would love it. Yeah.
You see these old productions of Joan Sutherland and Marilyn Horne, and they always have to have the duet scenes where there's like stairs so that Marilyn Horne could be like up 3 stairs.
Yeah. Or have a very, very high plumed helmet with lots of feathers at the top, so she has some presence. Yeah.
But this actually leads to the next topic, because I think that, based on the way I hear you sing in The Crown, that you would be looking to make headway into repertoire that really showcases your tone and the warmth of your voice. But your second album goes the opposite direction. You are singing lute song with none other than Stephen Stubbs. So I mean, like, who doesn't want to record with Stephen Stubbs, the co-artistic director of Boston Early Music Festival, among many other things. You're doing like some laws and some air de cour, and I don't know, is there Dowland? No, Purcell.
There's some Dowland, there's Purcell, 4 pieces by Purcell, folk tunes, some Italian arias from the Venetian stage. So the sort of the original theme behind it was that I do all this big operatic stuff, and I also love singing the intimate things, and I just didn't have a lot of that out there. I wanted to do an album showcasing the kind of softer side of what I can do, this sort of salon style, rather than singing in a big opera house, with more nuance and more sort of just soft singing and softer kind of dramatic approach as well. And then this idea of like just approaching the music of the time, but looking at a lot of sides of the music. So I didn't want to just do a Dowland album, for example, which is easy. I mean, you could find enough Dowland to easily do several albums if you wanted to, but I got intrigued by the idea of what music was really around at the time, and like what Dowland might have heard walking down the street in terms of these folk tunes and things, and how that might have influenced his compositions. And so I just wanted to get a very broad take on this idea of love sickness, and like with different languages, different approaches from different countries, different styles of music, and then just weave that all together, which I think we did pretty successfully. And working with Stephen was amazing. He's so fantastic. We just had a great time. And so it was nice because I felt like we were really making music,
I feel like I saw some branding for this album somewhere as being like the anti-Valentine's Day album.
Yeah, well, it is, yeah. Like if Valentine's didn't work out for you,
Yeah.
then you can listen to these tunes because it is a lot of the sadder. But there was this idea in the 17th century that you could just go ahead and be in that space. You could kind of enjoy the melancholy if that's how you were feeling. You could just feel it, and so it's an hour long album of just kind of going to that place and reveling in the sadness of being
Beautiful suffering.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
Well, I hope that the relationship with Stephen Tubbs might, result in other opportunities to see you in the U.S. in Baroque opera.
Would be wonderful. Yeah, we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Because we are a sports themed show, we always like to ask, do you have any like favorite team or favorite athlete or favorite sport that you play yourself?
I mean, it seems like maybe I would because I am this sort of bodybuilder guy, but so I guess that if that's a sport, we could talk about bodybuilders and I keep track of them. But like, football, baseball, it's I don't really spend too much time in that world. I grew up in Colorado, so maybe I should say the Broncos because when I was young, everyone
That's okay. You don't have to be artificial about it. But what we always like to do here on this show is to try to connect, this with sport with what we do as singers. And I'll talk for a little bit so you can start thinking about how you can relate your bodybuilding or the bodybuilders you follow to the art that you make.
Yeah, no, that I definitely see a lot of connections there. Like when I'm in the gym, it's very similar to being in the practice room in terms of how I structure things. Like I spend time warming up and preparing myself to do the actual thing. And you spend maybe 10 minutes just sort of warming everything up, getting ready. And then when you sit down and you're, doing a bench press or something, you have to know what you're capable of doing before you do it. So you sort of choose the right weight and the amount of reps that you think it's possible to do, and you don't want to hurt yourself. And that's a little bit like choosing the right repertoire to sing. Like I wouldn't want to go and sing some big Wagner or something. It just wouldn't be appropriate for my voice. So I have to know my own limits and be self-aware about what I can accomplish vocally as well as in the gym. So I see a lot of like kind of mental connections. And when I'm in the gym, I spend an hour working as hard as I can, pushing, trying to be really focused and getting as much out of it as I can, which is the same way that I approach my singing too. And I think this idea of focus is an important thing that can connect both singing and sport too.
But there's no like release like you have in performance, like where you you get to show what you've done. And of course we want to achieve the same level that we achieve in the practice room on stage. But I guess with working out, it's like, well, you're just walking around wearing shirts that show off your guns, Yeah,
I thought about for a while I was thinking about doing competitions as like bodybuilding, just because when I do something, I'm really committed to it and I want to kind of follow through to the highest level that I can and learn as much about that thing as I can. It's just why I also have a PhD, because I got interested in this topic and I just went down a rabbit hole and wanted to know as much as I could about it. So bodybuilding's a little the same. Like when I started really getting serious about it, I thought, I should do some competitions, but what you have to do to your body in order to be a good competitive bodybuilder just doesn't fit with being a good opera singer, to take it to that extreme. So pretty quickly I realized that wasn't going to be happening.
Yeah. I'm sure your costume designers don't want all that oil and their Well, Randall Scotting, we're going to close by listening to something from Lovesick. This is Oh Solitude, the solitary practice of being in the gym and of being in the practice room in song. Randall, thank you so much for being on operaboxscore.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Randall Scotting with lutenist Stephen Stubbs performing a little bit of Purcell for us all. Thank you so much, Randall, for being our guest.
Man, I want to meet Randall in the gym and have him spot me on those weights. I might learn a thing or two.
He could probably use you as the dumbbell, George.
Steady. Hey, look, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Stitcher and Spotify. Just click follow, and then on Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. Chalk Talk is next.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
All right, folks, it's that time of year again. We are starting to hear those season announcements, and one of the big ones just hit this past week, and that, of course, was from the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And this is a very weird season for the Met. This is, of course, we covered before because of their, recent dip in budget and concerns over ticketing, COVID pandemic, all that stuff. They're only going to be presenting 18 operas this season, which is the lowest number they've had in 4 decades. And the only reason it was that low in the early 80s was because of a strike. So this is
it's the good old days of.
In addition to the fact that it's only 18 operas, one of those arguably is not an opera, and one of those is definitely not an opera. That's actually, they're doing a Verdi's Requiem, which they are counting as one of the 18 unstaged as far as I know, which is interesting. Of course, part of their strategy, which we also covered a few weeks ago, or maybe a couple months ago at this point, is that they're going to really lean into living composers, which is exciting. And I that's something that we've wanted the Met to do for a while. What I will say is that these new operas are not brand new works. None of these are premieres, but they're time-tested pieces, even if, that time was much more recently than their usual repertoire. So let's start off with their new-ish operas that are also new productions. They're bringing in Jake Heggie's Dead Man Walking with Joyce DiDonato and
Ryan McKinney.
And Ryan McKinney.
And we have to just pause you right there. Not friend of the show, Michael Mays, who has sung that role literally all over the world for the most important audiences. I do not understand. I mean, Ryan McKinney, I don't know you. You're probably a great guy, but I do not understand why Michael Mays was not cast in this. It's a shame.
They wanted Ryan McKinney, I guess. We also have Latonia Moore and Susan Graham. Yannick will be conducting that. Now, I think, this is a new production. I really like Dead Man Walking. I'm excited to see it. But it is probably the safest new quote-unquote opera I could possibly think of, which, is fine. But I think that's kind of a theme we'll see going forward here.
Well, the daring part for the Jake Heggie selection is in the director, which is Ivo van Hove.
Right, that's true.
Dutch, I think. So, I mean, his aesthetic is incredibly pared down. You see his work in the opera houses in Europe, or if it's on Broadway, it's like a blank wall and a blank floor and one prop. So,
I mean, that might sound very attractive to the Met's budget right now. With their
and
18
it can be effective. He's curturally doing the Don Giovanni,
sure,
which is running there right now. It's a relatively sort of blank canvas that he's on. My question here is twofold. Is first of all, is that sort of aesthetic going to work for something like Dead Man Walking?
Yeah.
Can that piece really hold up to a sort of a concept like that? But secondarily, I'm always concerned when European directors try and tackle relatively American topics like the death penalty. And I'm not sure the depth of understanding that is going to be brought to this production. Look, Van Hove is obviously a smart guy, brilliant director. I'm a big fan. How is that going to relate to what I think is a very American story?
That's a good point. I'd still be interested in seeing the take. I like the opera a lot. I think more interesting is the next new opera, which is going to be Anthony Davis's X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X. That's going to have Will Liverman in the title role, alongside Leah Hawkins, Rayanne Bryce Davis, bass baritone Michael Samuel, or is it Samuel? I might have mistyped that one.
Michael Samuel.
Samuel. And we got tenor Victor Ryan Robertson. Kazim Abdullah will be conducting. The director is Robert O'Hara. I'm really excited to see this opera on the Met stage. This is one that I think all of Anthony Davis's works, really, he had a bit of a surge in popularity about 30 years ago now, and he's kind of languished in obscurity until until everyone realized that, Black composers should be going on, last year, much too late. But I'm really excited to see this on the Met stage. I think it'll be really interesting. This is a highlight of the season for me. Perhaps less of a highlight for me, we've got Daniel Catan's Florencia in El Amazonas. It will be directed by Mary Zimmerman, whose work I really like, and I know George is a big fan.
Well, here's the same comparison with this between Dead Man Walking, right? Is like it's not a super exciting choice, but it's very magical. And if there's one thing that Mary does well, it is theatrical magic. My guess is that this production is probably going to be more than the sum of its parts, and that Mary Zimmerman is going to bring something very special and unique and put that into the hands of Eileen Perez.
Yeah, I wouldn't count this production out because of its cast. Eileen Perez as Florencia, I think it might be a role debut for her. And the cast also includes Gabriela Reyes, I believe, reprising, I forget the name of the role, the same role she sang here in Chicago, opposite Ana Maria Martinez. And Reyes is phenomenal. So I would actually be very excited to see that one.
Yeah, it's a good cast. I'm not a huge fan of Daniel Catan's work, but I think Florencia is the best thing I've seen from him. So I would love to see it. And I think Eileen Perez, friend of the show, will knock it out of the park. The big one that I, of course, am excited about, this is the highlight of the whole season for me, is El Nino by John Adams. As you all know, big El Nino head over here. Mm-hmm. This is an opera oratorio, so really kind of stretching that definition of 18 operas, as I mentioned earlier. However, this one will lend itself well to staging, I think.
It's a great choice. It's the production's directed by Liliana Blaine Cruz. Sorry, Weston, I just cut you off. It's
go ahead.
Debut. Puppets by puppet designer James Ortiz. Marin Alsop on the podium. Julia Bullock, Devon Tynes,
great
Simon
cast.
Chung, Kiman Mara. It's great that this piece is being done because staging oratorio has merit. It has value. And this piece is not done a lot. And I'm really excited to see what happens with this.
Yeah, I absolutely love this piece, and I think this is a piece on the scale that feels like it should be done by an opera house the size of the Met.
But you also said that so casually, George. Kiman Mara is making his Met debut.
Yeah, it's so exciting.
He's still in his 20s, I think, that guy. So it's fun to show.
That's amazing.
He got the OBS bump,
That ends all of the brand new operas that are new productions. We also have a new
None
production.
of them are brand new, just new to the Met.
Exactly. We have a couple new productions here for older operas. We've got a Carmen with a production by Carrie Cracknell, whom I do not know at all.
Yeah, English theater director mostly from the Gate Theatre in London and the National Theatre as well. She has done opera before. Berg's Lulu at English National Opera. This will be absolutely a feminist take. It will be pared down. And with this cast, this is an exciting choice.
Well, Aigul Akmetsina is a rising star. I've not heard her sing. I don't know her work, but she's like all the rage apparently. But missed opportunity to put Janae Bridges on that stage singing Carmen.
Yeah, we've also got Piotr Bachawa in there, who has done it many times. We've got Angel Blue as Michaela, which will be exciting. We got Kyle Kettleson, bass baritone, as Escamillo. I think it'll be a good production. Friend of the show. I think it'll be a good production, but, in general, an announcement of Carmen, even if it's a new production, doesn't excite me too much. La Forza del Destino does excite me a bit more. This is also a new production by Mariusz Trelinsky. I could be pronouncing that completely wrong, with Lisa Davidson as Leonora, which is going to be really cool.
Awesome.
Brian Yagda, it will be Don Navarro, and Igor Golovenko as Don Carlo. I think this is going to be a really pretty fire cast, honestly. I don't know the director's work, but this is one that is from the more traditional mold. I would expect this out of a normal season. But, a new production of La Forza is pretty much always welcome in my book.
It's not my favorite opera, but Mariusz Trelinsky, Polish director, I saw his Parsifal in Berlin. I mean, it's like gutsy, pared down stuff. I like the aesthetic, and I don't like the opera, but I think this is in interesting hands.
We also have the other big theme here, because we've gone past the new productions, and now we're back to new operas again, but these are quick returns to the stage. They're bringing back Fire Shut Up in My Bones, this time with Ryan Speedo Green, and they're bringing back The Hours, which were both huge hits for them, and I think both of those operas were the main impetus for making sure the season had so many new sounding operas. I think it's a little odd to bring them back so quickly, you know?
We need to put a pin in this because we have to talk about this again when it actually happens.
Yeah.
To see if doing these operas so quickly after they were already done, if they'll get the same turnout. I mean, yes, maybe they were sold out for those performances, but because it was a new thing,
it feels like
no.
It feels like
you're saying it's a novelty. That's why they were popular. Is because they were a novelty. No, they're
popular.
I mean, they're popular because they're good. So
they're good, but
people will go. People will go.
Did you see The Hours?
Okay, The Hours wasn't good, but Fire Shut Up in My Bones was good.
Okay.
Yeah, Fire Shut Up in My Bones is great. This feels like bringing them back so quickly. Peter Gelb does this thing, which I like to call Broadway brain sometimes, where he wants, sometimes it feels like he wants to make the Met a Broadway space so badly. And he tries to bring things back really quickly, even bringing on Kelly O'Hara. No hate to her. She did a phenomenal job. But like, you know, it's really that sort of like aiming. Sometimes it feels like he's aiming for a Broadway crowd, which will be like, I saw this cool thing last year. Let's go see it again this year. And I think it could be a strategy for making money. I don't know how much I jive with that artistically. But we'll see how it goes. I'll be really interested to see if it performs as well the second time around so quickly. Then we get into
I don't want to be mistaken. I thought The Hours was actually good. I didn't care for the production, but I thought the opera itself was good. So.
Yeah. Then we get into the less interesting stuff. We'll kind of rapid fire a few of these here. These are all revivals. They're bringing back Nabucco for the first time in a while, which will be pretty nice. They're bringing back La Rondine with Angel Blue, which will be kind of fun.
And Jonathan Tettleman, who is making his Met debut.
Mm-hmm. They're bringing back Bohème, Un Ballo in Maschera, Tannhäuser, Magic Flute, Madame Butterfly, Turandot, Romeo and Juliet of Gounod, which are all fine pieces, but nothing that gets me out of bed. Some good artists appearing in those. We've got people like Roberto Alagna, Charles Castronovo, Christina Goerke, who's going to be amazing in whatever she does, Elsa van den Heever, Quinn Kelsey, seeing some friends of the show, Matthew Polenzani. One kind of weird one, of course, is the Verdi Requiem, which I feels like a cheap cop-out to call it one of the 18 operas. One exciting revival I do want to point out and spend a little bit more time on here is Gluck's Orfeo, which is going to be revived with Anthony Roth Costanzo as Orpheus, soprano Ying Fang as Eurydice,
friend of the show,
and Elena Villalon as Amor.
Friend of the show.
Look at that. Okay, so if you want that OBS bump,
I think that's going to be
proof.
A really cool production. Really excited to see it, and I think this is a smart use of the Mets. Looking back at its roster and like saying Anthony Roth Costanzo was associated with one of the biggest hits of the past few years, Akhenaten. Let's bring him back. And really like put him on all the promotional material, which is kind of interesting because none of these other revivals I've really seen much in the promo material I see online, the ads, but I'm already seeing Anthony Roth Costanzo for this Gluck, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, he's a stage animal,
Yeah.
Oh, he is. He's great.
And Ying Fang is maybe the best technician in her Bach right now.
Right.
So
here's what you're not seeing, right? Is that you're not seeing operas by women composers, right? So the Met has a total of 2 operas by women, the most recent from 2016. And as Sarah Kirkland Snyder put it on Facebook, she said, look, there's many brilliant, successful, market-tested operas by women composers that are being ignored. These are operas that have won Pulitzer's awards acclaim, and so it's not just a missed opportunity. It's insulting. It almost feels like Peter Gelb doesn't think female composers have been invented.
I mean, I think what we want to remind ourselves of here is that the Met is going into this brave new world of new-ish operas in a kind of an opportunistic way. This is what the market is dictating for the Met. This is the kind of thing that we've been clamoring for such a long time.
Yeah, but
they're not doing it ideologically. They're not doing it because it's important to bring new voices in. They're doing it because it seems to be selling tickets, which is kind of a disappointing reason to do it. I am glad they're doing it. Don't get me wrong. Especially Life and Times of Malcolm X. I think that's a great one to put on the Met stage. That is important. But I really, really, it was weird to me to read the list of Met operas that were all these newer operas by living composers and still feel kind of disappointed.
Look, so female directors, yes, the roster
I will give
has
them credit
some
for that.
Representation on that. That does not take away the problem of the lack of female composers. When we get to the Opera Philly announcement later in the show, you're going to see a marked contrast on that very point.
I just want to say before we close this out that you opera companies of New York area, there's an opportunity now here for you to not only do works by female composers, but also to find the gaps in the Met season and be that place for American tourists, not American tourists, but tourists coming to America who are looking for opera, who are looking for art. Yeah. I think it's a shame that they're reducing their season. I understand why they have to do it, but New York should be a place where you can see a standard repertoire opera any day of the week,
Yeah, exactly.
With good singers. And there are plenty of good singers in New York, so you can do it,
Let us know what you think about the Mets upcoming season. You can just send us a voice memo. You can email us your hot takes. Either way, operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get the OBS beer coaster and the lapel pin for letting us know what you think about the Mets season. Lots to talk about on that and in the 2-minute drill.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Russian bass Ildar Abdrazakov is speaking out against the Met, quote, out of solidarity with his colleagues Anna Netrebko and Hybla Gertzmava. The bass added, I just paused my relationship with the Metropolitan Opera myself. I canceled participation in La Forza del Destino and Gounod's Romeo et Juliet. The way the theater treated them is beyond. My deep conviction is that people of art should remain neutral and thereby continuing to unite peoples and countries with their art.
To unite peoples, yes. Peter Gelb has responded that Netrebko and Gerzamova chose a side and they chose the wrong side. I feel sorry that Abrazakov, like many other Russians, are so misinformed and don't really understand what's going on in the world. End quote.
At the Mets concert for Ukraine, Emily D'Angelo's dress was covered with 365 tally marks, recording each day of Europe's bloodiest conflict since World War II. Met music director Yannick Nézet-Séguin conducted for Ukraine a concert of remembrance and hope that featured the Ukrainian national anthem, Mozart Requiem, Beethoven 5, and Valentin Silvestrov's hymn Prayer for Ukraine.
The Met's current production of Lohengrin, directed by Francois Girard, was originally a co-production with the Bolshoi Theater, but everything changed when Putin attacked Ukraine and Peter Gelb immediately severed ties with the Russian company, leaving the production in jeopardy. And so the Met did the only logical thing, build a second identical set for $1 million and put the show on anyway.
Opera Philadelphia has announced its 23-24 season, including listings for Festival 023 and the world premiere of a Renee Orth opera about journalist Nellie Bly, as well as the American premiere of The Listeners by, hey, Missy Mazzoli, and the world premiere of Woman with Eyes Closed by, hey, Jennifer Higdon. More details after the drill.
AGMA has filed a dispute against New York City Opera for multiple violations of the union's collective bargaining agreement. In a letter to AGMA members, the union warns that New York City Opera's refusal to operate in good faith leads us to caution our members before accepting work with NYCO. The union can no longer say with confidence that AGMA members who sign a contract with NYCO will have the terms of those contracts fulfilled in a respectful, timely manner.
I thought Nika was dead and gone. Crunching the numbers, the Bayreuth Festival will see a significant reduction in its next year's budget. The Society of Friends of Bayreuth has decided to cut its contribution to the festival by almost 1 million euros starting in 2024. That's a third of its annual donation.
More like acquaintances of Bayreuth now, am I right?
Meanwhile, Paris Opera announced it will invest 7.2 million euros in fixing the Palais Garnier's facade from the result of pollution and other climate-related wear and tear. The project will feature cleaning, replacing degraded elements, restoring sculptures, and installing a state-of-the-art anti-pigeon system.
Yes.
Ooh. Günter Greusbuck has canceled his engagements with the Met in order to stay close to his family. Quote, "It's always a bit disappointing when the new season is announced and you are not part of the roster, but it was my decision to stay a bit more in Europe with my family in 2023 and 2024. It's definitely the darkest side of our job."
In trade news, Omer Meyer-Velber will become Hamburg Staatsoper's general music director and chief conductor of the Hamburg Phil, beginning with the 25-26 season, following on from Kent Nagano. Velber will remain as music director of the Volksoper Wien until 2027.
On the disabled list, soprano Sarah Gartland has been suffering from the after effects of a case of COVID-19, rendering her unable to sing. But she will not withdraw from Opera Colorado's production of Korngold's Die Tote Stadt. Instead, she will act the dual roles of Marie and Marietta on stage, while soprano Kara Shea Thompson sings from the pit.
Joyce DiDonato has announced that she is canceling her concerts and recording of Carmen due to the conductor John Nelson's failing health. Quote, "Let's work not to see this as bad news, but instead welcome the positive news that John's prognosis is strong and that he is surrounded by an incredible community of people who love him."
It's Ildar time again. Abjazakov is out of Offenbach's Tales of Hoffmann at La Scala, saying, quote, "Life makes its adjustments, and unfortunately I have to make some cancellations because of family reasons."
The Glyndebourne Festival has announced a cast change for its production of Dialogues of the Carmelites. A source close to the situation told the Daily Telegraph, trusted news source, an unexpected opportunity arose which was impossible for Daniel Denise to refuse. Denise, who was set to sing the role of Blanche de la Force, will be replaced by Sally Matthews.
Exit stage right, conductor Caspar Richter has died unexpectedly at the age of 78. The German conductor, who got his start as an assistant to Lauren Mazel, went on to a permanent position at Wiener Staatsoper and founded the orchestra at Theater an der Wien.
And on this day, February 27th in 1649, it was the baptism of German composer Johann Philipp Krieger. In 1709, Alessandro Scarlatti's opera Il Teodosio premiered in Naples. In 1709, French baritone François Lepage was born. He created a number of roles in Rameau operas. Niccolo Piccinini had two premieres on this date. In 1766, his opera La Baronessa di Montecupo premiered in Rome, and in 1778, his Roland in Paris. 1813 was the first performance of Rossini's Il Signor Bruschino in Venice. In 1849, Verdi had a premiere, La Battaglia di Lengano in Rome. In 1888, German soprano and famous teacher Lotte Lehmann was born in Perlberg. Her pupils include Janet Baker, Grace Bumbry, Matilda Dobbs, Marilyn Horne, Gerard Suzay, Shirley Verrett. And she created roles such as Ariadne in Ariadne of Naxos, Barak's wife in Die Frau ohne Schatten, and Christine in Intermezzo. In 1913, Walter Darmosh's opera Cyrano de Bergerac premiered at the Met. 1935 was the birth of the great Mirella Freni in Modena. And in 1986, Udo Zimmermann's opera Weiße Rose premiered in Hamburg. That was on February 27th, 1986.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
I don't think I have to tell you what the role of the Marschallin has meant in my life as an artist. I have sung all 3 roles in Rosenkavalier. First as a young beginner Sophie, later as the bearer of the rose, Count Octavian, and then the Marschallin. And it is this a very nostalgic feeling that I have to watch Kena Katten to something which I would like to do if I have a voice. Okay.
Just a little bit of Lotte Lehmann intimidating her student in a masterclass before they even get up to sing. That was from the Music Academy of the West in 1961.
Yikes. Oh my goodness. These season announcements it happens earlier and earlier every year, it feels like. I don't know, but we want to start with Opera Philadelphia here in the drill. Start with O23. Starts with a new opera from composer Renee Orth and librettist Hannah Moscovich. This is called 10 Days in a Madhouse, which is inspired by the real-life story of Nellie Bly, a reporter from the end of the 19th century. That includes Christian
Which
Van
could also
Horn.
be a description of the old festival itself, 10 Days in a Madhouse. So
It kind of is.
Yeah.
It kind of is, right? Simone Boccanegra, Boccanegra is the production with Christian Van Horn. I am, all over the shop. Later on in the festival, Karim Suleiman's Unholy Wars, which is a project inspired by Monteverdi's Tancredi e Clorinda. That's directed by Kevin Newbury.
okay,
Friend of the
so
show.
That's gonna be really
let's
cool.
Just take a pause right here. The O Festival usually has a centerpiece opera, some new thing like world premiere. Like last year was the David T. Little Black Lodge, and the year before it was that thing about computers. Katya and something.
Dennis and Katya?
Dennis and Katya, yeah. So this year, the main stage opera for the festival, centerpiece opera, is Simone Boccanegra with
Right.
Anna Maria Martinez and Quinn Kelsey and Christian Van Horn. So
That's
that
the big-
in and of itself is like a reason to check out the
Oh,
festival.
absolutely.
The world premiere is this woman-centric show, 10 Days in a Madhouse.
Right.
And one of the sort of satellite performances is this thing from friend of the show, Karim Suleiman, which I believe premiered at Spoleto or one of those Festango,
Something
whatever, I
like
forget.
that.
Something like last year. And people love it, and it's already a qualified success.
And then following that, we go from there to the Anonymous Lover,
Which is
bringing
their
it
official,
from-
that's their official season now.
Yeah, this is their official
Exactly.
season, I should say.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, the Joseph Boulogne opera, which is having a moment right now. Just had its debut recording from Haymarket here in Chicago, and and he's really having a moment now because there's also the movie coming out pretty soon as well, which, based on the trailer, looks like it might not be very good, but we'll find out. They're going to have Simone Harcum making her company debut as Leontine in that opera, along with tenor Matthew White. And the main season will close at the Academy of Music with a new production of Madame Butterfly, bringing in director Aria Umezawa, which will kind of deconstruct the sort of Orientalist vibes of the original, which I think will be really, really interesting. And I think it'll be...
she's a phenomenal director. And here's why this is a great hire.
It's going to be
Right.
Act 2 first, right?
Is
Do it backwards.
we've done that, right? So I think I'm right in saying that Aria identifies as Japanese Canadian. Now, and I've heard her say this on record, is typically she is brought in to direct these productions of, say, Turandot and Madame Butterfly.
Mhm.
I would argue ostensibly to kind of like take the curse off these pieces. But look, we have this like, Japanese Canadian director directing them. But what she's able to do is go further and say, okay, that's not why we're in this business. Here's what we're doing. And so she uses framing devices, specifically on Butterfly, framing devices to make sense of the factual errors that are
Right.
in Puccini's representation of Japanese culture, and to really dig into those and to make them interesting and engaging to watch, but also to put a real point of view on this problematic piece.
So yeah, we're sort of like all over the place with this announcement. I'm sorry so much, Opera Philadelphia, for not doing this like in the right order. So the season begins after the festival. The season begins in the winter with Anonymous Lover. Then in the spring is Madame Butterfly. Then we have these other shows, the Missy Mazzoli. Where do these things fit?
I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but this is what happens when Opera Philadelphia doesn't pay us to talk about them. We just kind of like go in, scattershot, talk about whatever we want. I'm really excited about this
Look,
opera.
the interesting stuff rises to the top, right? Like that's the business that we're
exactly.
in here.
And this is a really, really cool piece because it's a collaboration between Missy Mazzoli and, of course, friend of the show, Royce Vavrick. And they've done they've done other stuff together, including Breaking the Waves, which almost made it to Chicago before the pandemic shut them down.
This is why Oliver's confused about when the Mazzoli and the Higdon are happening, is because they're not until 2024. And Opera Philadelphia's 50th anniversary season.
Okay, so they're already teasing things that are going to happen
exactly, and they teased you, man. They got you.
You've been teased.
So there's a Missy Mazzoli and a Jennifer Higdon.
Mm-hmm.
Are going to be part of 024.
That is correct.
Which
is Woman with Eyes Closed, specifically.
Oh, man, I was so confused. Okay, got it.
Clear as mud.
Got it. All right.
Despite the confusion, I think the thing to focus on with this is that, this is what like new opera done right is. And like,
confusing.
Confusingly. We did a terrible job, but Opera Philadelphia is not doing a terrible job.
But George was right when he said that the announcements keep coming earlier and earlier. Like we're getting this announcement a full 18 months.
We weren't prepared.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. All right, well, we better talk about somebody else besides Philadelphia.
Well, we can talk about another disaster, Ildar Abdrazakov, real quick.
No, wait, the Opera Philadelphia is not a disaster.
No, we're a disaster. We're the disaster.
Okay, good. But they could be a disaster if they don't get us plane tickets this year. So
Yeah.
And hotel rooms.
Ildar. What are we gonna do with you, Ildar?
So basically what happened was there was an article written somewhere that pointed out that Ildar Abdrazakov has some connections to the Putin government, which is not surprising with a lot of high-profile Russian singers. And basically on the heels of that, and of course the 1-year anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, he announced that he was pulling out of the Met and for ostensibly to support Anna Netrebko and company, but also kind of because he feels like he might be next on the chopping block. I believe he also recently announced that he was going to do a concert at which like Putin would be present, perhaps even in Russia. And it's, I think that, he's, throwing a bit of a tantrum to a certain extent. I think that, we did bash Peter Gelb quite a bit earlier, but, he is choosing a side here.
Well, he's choosing his wife's side.
I think that there's a certain, I think there's something that, raises the hair on the back of my neck whenever I hear that, art should be neutral. Like it shouldn't be. And honestly, I kind of, as much as I do not agree with anything to do with the war, at least the singers who are outspoken, like pro Putin, whatever, like at least they're not like, at least they're, using their art to like further like an end, even if it's the wrong one, Neutral art is a myth. It just doesn't exist. And I think that, that's something that has to be reckoned with if you're going to be an artist, quite honestly.
And meanwhile, we have Emily D'Angelo, who is being very political in and of herself.
Exactly.
And, cheers to her. I mean, not that it takes whatever balls to do something at a concert that's concert for Ukraine, but still, like, she's making her position very clear,
Yeah,
she's doing it,
which is what I would expect out of Emily D'Angelo. Yeah. She's such an intelligent presence whenever she's putting together a concert or participating or helping program something, in addition to her, phenomenal voice. But she's great.
This is why I was confused about the François Girard production of Lohengrin, because it's a co-pro with the Bolshoi.
Right.
The set couldn't make it to the Met because of the U.S. embargo on goods coming in from Russia.
It's even weirder than that, because essentially I believe the production was originally premiering at the Bolshoi. Peter Gelb was actually at the Bolshoi when the invasion started for this production.
Okay.
And the war started, and he flew home a day early, and, made the decision before I think even any sanctions were in about this kind of thing, made the decision that they were not going to, have any ties with the Bolshoi. But they wanted to still put the production on because, of course, they, have added funds, hired people,
Right. So then they go on and they build this identical replica of the set.
And that's why they only have 18 operas this year.
Exactly. $1 million, man.
Yeah. He's great.
The fact that Joyce DiDonato was planning on singing and recording Carmen is like question mark. I mean, I don't doubt that she could, do whatever she wants, but it's not exactly the voice type you imagine singing Carmen.
No.
So maybe
it would definitely be a take on it. It would not be a standard Carmen, but
yeah. I mean, I would say her voice is even lighter than Teresa Berganza's, and Teresa Berganza ended up being the Carmen of her generation. So who are we to say?
Yeah.
Last quick hit we should do on Danielle Denise getting, an opportunity that makes her withdraw from Glyndebourne.
An offer she couldn't refuse.
Yeah. I think that, when you are married to, Mr. Glyndebourne, you can do basically whatever you want.
Yeah. Let us wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call. On Opera Box Score.
All right. I think I understand what's happening in Upper Philadelphia for the next 2 years, though, now.
You've done it.
That could be your good call.
That's the good call.
That's my good call. But Oliver, you get to go first with a good call or a bad call to wrap this show up.
So it's week 2 of my full submersion in Thomas Dunford recordings. And earlier today, I got to interview Thomas Dunford for my other job. And he was very, very like a lute player, exactly how I expected him to be. Just sort of aloof and like rushing from one gig to the next. He had to talk to me while he was like in an Uber, and sometimes his Uber driver was talking and like I could hear him over the phone, and then he was like walking in the street and like some woman from like Senegal was like shouting at him. So it was a very interesting interview. But to prepare, I've been listening to all of his records, and I think you called it out, Wesson, when it came out, but the Amazona album that he recorded with Lea DeZandra is awesome. But I've been listening to the newest one, the Yeston Davies and Lea DeZandra
also
Handel, which is just stunningly beautiful. If you haven't heard it yet, it's called Eternal Heaven, and I don't want to say it's a banger because I don't want you to think it's going to be fun. It's just a very deeply felt, beautiful, beautiful album.
Weston Williams.
I have a banger myself. So in these post-COVID, more or less, times, there was apparently some consternation in Tokyo about how to get audiences back to opera. So director Daniel Kramer collaborated with Team Lab, which is a Japanese group known for digital art installation projects, have come together to do what I'm calling laser Turandot. It's Turandot, but with lasers. It's what it sounds like. There's a Reuters story floating around the internet. You can, I think you could probably just Google Turandot lasers. We'll probably also put it on the website.
We'll put a link.
But you can take a look at it, and it is just, it is a laser light show, and it is also Turandot. And there's something that tickles me so deeply about that as a concept. But I would absolutely go and see it. So, like, if it's working, it's working. You do you, Daniel.
Daniel Kramer, he's a good friend of mine. Look at the photos. We'll put a link on the
and look at the photos of Randall Scotting.
There you go. Ashley had a good call as well, but it's on Instagram, and I'm not on Instagram, so I'm just going to put a link to that in the show notes. And you can check that out. Sorry, Ashley, I don't understand how it works. Hey, I got a good call as well. The family and we went to see a Saturday matinee downtown in Chicago last weekend of Cats. Finally, I have seen Cats, and it was utterly delightful, and we were singing and dancing all the way home.
Next stop, Bad Cinderella.
Next stop is the all-woman production of 1776, which is coming to Chicago. That is what's next. And that is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Send us that voice memo. Email us your hot takes. operaboxscore@gmail.com. Find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. And that's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS on our donate page. Your announcer is Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. And your audio editor is Weston Williams. For our guest, Randall Scotting, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about operas written by women, but only during Women's History Month. We're back with an all-new show next week. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more unrefusable opportunities for Danielle Denise. Join us.